This conference will now be recorded.
All right, let's talk about homeowners coverage. It's a package policy. And before we get into it, if you have not registered, consider it. If you want to know more after watching this webinar, you can go to lgdstudy.com. You can register, purchase access, which gives you access to sample test questions, an online playbook of definitions and terms, kind of like having your own flashcard set online. Charts to help you understand other differences between the policies, such as what we're going to be covering today on homeowners, but I'll have dwelling and auto insurance and other things like that. You'll have access to more webinars that are recorded and also upcoming training schedule for webinars that you can just jump into, and classes if you're in the Northern California area. And here and there, I'll be having a couple more classes throughout the state of California. So if you do have questions, you can also access the instructor. I'll give you that information at the end of this presentation. But with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So, homeowners, in order to buy a homeowner's policy, the property must be what we call owner occupied. So, you own the house and you live in it. For a homeowner's policy, you can cover up to two family living units. That's like a single residential family home or a duplex, or you own two homes where you live in one and maybe your sibling lives in the other one, and it could be multiple locations. If you have more than two, well, the next step is to purchase a dwelling policy instead of a homeowner's policy. Always keep in mind, homeowners is a package. It's a self-contained package policy. So there's different types of homeowners policies depending on what you need. All right, so we have an HO1 basic form, which in some states they don't even sell anymore. All right, California is one of those states where we don't even sell the basic form. Very rare to get that as a test question. So HO2 is a broad form, which is a good program if you own a home. HO3 is a special form. That's even better if you own a home. HO4 is for renters. Keep in mind on your exam, they typically won't say renters coverage. There's no such thing as a renter's policy. It's basically a homeowner's policy designed for someone who rents, all right, whether you rent a house or you rent an apartment. All right, and we'll get into the coverages associated with that. Another policy, if you own a home, would be HO5. Again, that's a special form similar to an HO3, but it's a little better than the HO3. And so HO5 would be the best if you own a home. And just like renters, there's no such thing as a condo policy. If you own a condo, you want to purchase an HO6. It's a homeowner's policy designed for someone who owns a condo. And an HO8 is for antique homes, older homes. To be honest with you, an HO8 is a modified HO1. One of the key items there, it only pays actual cash value. The reason is if an antique home burns down, we can rebuild it to look just like it did before the fire, but it's no longer an antique. And so we typically use actual cash value as far as the valuation. Okay. So the general coverage part, section 1 is property, section 2 is liability. Make sure you understand that. All right. So what part of the homeowner's policy provides personal property or structures coverage? That would be section 1. Section 2, liability. That covers you and your family members anywhere in the world. All right. Broken down into personal liability and medical, which we'll get into. Theft is going to be part of property because theft really isn't associated with liability coverage. So now we'll dive in a little more deeper. Section 1, property. So there's different coverage parts based on that. So coverage A would be the dwelling. That means look at the main house. Anything bolted, welded, nailed, attached to that house, that would be coverage A. And so whatever it costs using a reconstruction cost calculator for coverage A, everything else is calculated as a percentage of what the amount is for dwelling for coverage A. All right. So let's say it's going to cost $400,000 to rebuild this particular house. Right. So coverage A, the limit will be $400,000. That's only covering the main dwelling. Remember, anything bolted, welded, nailed, attached to that house would qualify as coverage A. Now, coverage B would be other structures. That could be the fence around your yard. It could be a separate garage. Remember, if the garage is attached to the house, it's all going to be calculated under coverage A. But if you have a house and then you have a separate structure for the garage, that means there's a little bit of a space between the house and the building for the garage, maybe a utility line connecting the two. Then your garage would be coverage B, like a pool house, and like I said, the fence. And the standard limit is 10% of coverage A. So if we have $400,000 worth of coverage for coverage A, in my scenario here, then we'll give you another 40,000 to rebuild any other separate structures on the premises. All right. So at this point in time, we're paying 400,000 to rebuild the house plus 40,000 to rebuild any other structures on the property. Coverage C is going to be personal property. It's also called contents coverage. Personal property under a homeowner is covered at the full coverage limit anywhere in the world. The full coverage limit is 50% of coverage A. So again, if we have $400,000 worth of coverage for coverage A, we're going to give you 200,000. That's 50% of coverage A for your personal belongings. That would be your furniture, your clothes, your pots and pans. That means realistically, the difference between structures and personal property, flip the house upside down. Anything that falls will be covered C, personal property. Anything that sticks will be real property, which is structures. Dwelling and other structures is called real property. Personal property is called contents. Right, so keep that separate. Now, those are all direct loss coverages. Loss of use is an indirect loss coverage. So what that means is if this house burns down and you can't live there, you're going to need some money to stay at a hotel. And that's what coverage D is, loss of use. The standard limit is 20% of coverage A. Remember, these limits are for the test. Out in the real world, if you're selling insurance, your companies may have some different limits. But these are the items you need to know for the exam. Now, that loss of use coverage is broken down into additional living expenses, which covers the cost to put you up at a hotel, right? But also can include rental income. So maybe you have a house and you rent out a room to help make ends meet, whatever. And if the house burns down, your tenant has to relocate. They're not going to pay rent if they can't live there. The home is what we call untenantable, right? Well, then your homeowner's policy under coverage D, loss of use, under coverage B, can pay you missing rental income minus what's called discontinued expenses, which is basically utilities. Because if your tenants have to move someplace else, they're not going to pay gas, electricity if they're not even living in your house because they're going to have to pay that wherever they move to. Okay. And so that's all part of the property coverage. Also part of property is the theft coverage. Now, you typically get full coverage limit under the policy, but for certain high theft items, we have sublimits. A sublimit is a specific limit on a certain type of loss within the overall policy maximum. So even though we have $200,000 of personal property coverage using our scenario, if someone breaks in and steals your jewelry, you're going to get a maximum of $1,500. All right. Firearms and silverware, $2,500 maximum. That means if you have more than that, right, then you might want to consider getting inland marine coverage, which is a floater. There's also sublimits for trailers used with watercraft or trailers not used with watercraft. Right, I should probably clear that up a little bit. Of $1,500. All right. So again, it's a limit on a certain type of loss within the overall policy maximum, called a sublimit. Please keep in mind, if someone steals your jewelry, there's that $1,500 sublimit. But if the jewelry is in the house and it's destroyed by the fire and it melts into everything where they cannot, pull it up, then you would actually get actual cash value for that jewelry. It's only theft of jewelry that has that sublimit. Now, you can buy floaters, which is raising the property on your high theft items. Right? And you can pretty much get a floater on all your high theft items, collectibles, right? Except cash. You can't buy a floater to get more coverage in the event you have cash in your mattress, right? $200 is the maximum that your policy will pay for cash, whether it's destroyed by a fire or someone breaks in and steals it. That's all you're going to get. But for the other items, you want to increase limits? We have different floaters. There's a personal property floater, which is covering your personal property on an unscheduled basis. All right, let's say you have more than $1,500 worth of jewelry, but you don't have any one item that's more than $7,500. So then you'll get a personal property floater, which will give you more than $1,500, but not more than that $7,500 threshold. Now, the reason I say it's unscheduled is because I don't need a list. I don't need appraisals just yet. You just happen to have a little more jewelry than the base policy provides. Right? Now, if you've got some high ticket items, then you want to get a personal articles floater. This is anything more than $7,500. I'm just using $7,500 as a threshold. Each company is a little bit different in the real world. But personal article floater is going to cover your jewelry or your high theft items on a scheduled basis. Now, whenever you see scheduled, it means I need a list. I need to know what it is with appraisals. I need to know what it's worth. That's the valuation too of how much we're going to pay if you suffer loss. So personal properties, if you have more than your homeowner's policy will provide, but not a lot. And then personal article floater is you have high ticket items where we need appraisals. Personal effects floater is if you're traveling, taking a vacation, and you want to cover the items that are on your person, such as your camera, maybe your passport. That's typically where that comes into play. All right. Regarding floaters, it's all risk coverage, covers you anywhere in the world. All right. And it's a lot more broader coverage than your other policies. So, yeah, I know, even though it's called floaters and inland marine coverage, it really doesn't have anything to do with boats. It's just old maritime law terminology that we just still apply today. So, just to give you a heads up. Section 2, liability, like I said, covers you and your family members anywhere in the world. All right, so maybe you have a cocktail party at your house and someone slips and falls. Well, the medical payments to others basically covers the ambulance ride. Now they're in the hospital racking up some medical bills. And by the way, being in the hospital, they're not working. So that's that personal liability covering their medical bills and their lost wages. All right. Anytime you see L for liability, think L for lawsuit. Someone got injured because of your actions and they want to sue you to have you pay for it, either bodily injury or property damage. This covers you and your families, like I said, just like your personal property, anywhere in the world. So if you're in a golf course in southern Italy and you shank that ball and you hit some guy in the head, put him into a coma, this policy you brought here, based up on your limits, will actually cover that loss in another country. All right, just keep that in mind, right? So it's a good selling point when you get out there. So now let's talk about the different coverages. HO1, like I said, is a basic form. It's a simple form. You still got the 4 coverage parts under property, dwelling, other structures, personal property, and loss of use. Dwelling, other structures, personal property, we're going to provide coverage on an actual cash value basis. That means what does it cost to replace your belongings and your structures minus depreciation. And basic means limited. So we've got a few perils. We have the basic form perils. Right? That's going to be another part of the training where I actually go into the perils for each one. So yeah, A is for the house, B is for any other structures on the property, such as a fence or a separate garage. C is your personal property or contents, and of course D, loss of use to put you up at a hotel. Liability is also built in. I did not include theft here because theft is part of the property section, but it's in all the coverages. All right. Notice Section 2 liability is going to be the same on all of our homeowners policies. The property coverages are different between the homeowners policies, but Section 2 liability coverages are the same in all of our homeowners policies. It's based on the limits you choose. So these are the minimum limits that is provided with the program. You can always buy more. Okay. So then we have the HO2, which is the broad form. All right. So again, we have the coverages A, B, C, and D. All right. But now with the dwelling, instead of actual cash value for the dwelling and other structures, we actually pay replacement cost coverage. All right. Your personal property is still covered on an actual cash value basis. All right. And since it's broad form, it's still a named peril policy. It just covers more perils than the basic form. All right. So again, HO1 is basic, so there's limited perils. HO2 is broad, it just covers more perils. But now we do have better coverage on the structures. Again, Section 2 liability, remember, it's the same on all of our homeowners policies. HO3 is a special form. So now we're getting into a different type of coverage because it is replacement cost just like in HO2, but now we're covering the structures on an all risk basis. Whenever you see all risk, pay attention to exclusions. That means we cover anything you could possibly think of except for this list of exclusions right here, like earthquake, flood, volcanic eruption, right? Wear and tear and intentional acts, nuclear risk, and war. I mean, the catastrophic losses, wear and tear, and intentional acts are not covered. But if it's not on the exclusion list, it's covered. So we have better coverage on the structures, all risk coverage, replacement costs, but we still have those broad form perils, that type of coverage on our personal property. All right. So remember, Part C is personal property, actual cash value, covered on a broad form basis. The next program is a renters. All right. Now, the HO4 is for someone who rents. Either they rent a home or they rent an apartment, like I said. Now, notice there is no coverage A or coverage B because as a renter, you don't own the building and you don't have insurable interest in a structure, so you cannot insure the structure. Now, if you're living there, you mount a shelf to the wall. That's your shelf, all right? So yeah, that even though it's attached to the structure, that's your shelf, all right? But other than that, you cannot insure the building if you don't own it. So you're basically getting coverage for your personal property on an actual cash value basis, on a broad form basis, I should say. That's one of the selling points of a renter's policy. You also have loss of use because wherever you're staying, if it burns down, you're going to need money to live somewhere else. That's what that loss of use coverage is about. And again, Section 2 liability, just like all our homeowners policies, covers you and your family members anywhere in the world. Right? Again, remember, those are the standard limits, 100,000 for liability. Medical is $1,000. That's guest medical. If you slip and fall in your own place, you can't file a claim against your homeowner's policy. You can't sue yourself for the stuff you already own. Okay? So you should have health insurance. But if you have a friend over and they slip and fall, yeah, they could be injured. They could go after your medical and your liability also. All right. HO5 is a special form, similar to an HO3. We're just going to give you a little more coverage. All right. So we have coverage A as a dwelling. Anything bolted, welded, nailed to the house, that would be that. We're going to cover it on a replacement cost basis, and now we're going to cover your structures on an all risk basis. So it's very good coverage. All right. And I'll explain the differences in just a second between the homeowners policies. Coverage B is those other structures. Again, replacement cost basis on an all risk basis. Personal property, still actual cash value, but now we're covering your personal property on an all risk basis versus a broad form or named peril policy. Sorry about that. Coverage D, loss of use. Again, covers the cost put you up at a hotel until we rebuild your house so you can move back in. And Section 2 liability, as you can see, is the same in all of our policies so far. So let's kind of talk about the differences. If you own a home, you have three choices in policies. You have an HO2, HO3, or HO5. HO2 is good, HO3 is better, HO5 would be the best. So as you can see with an HO2, we're going to give you broad form perils coverage on the structures. That means it's named perils. And we're going to give you named peril coverage on your contents. All right, so that's good. HO3 is better because now we're giving you all risk coverage on the structures, but you still got that broad form coverage on your perils, or I'm sorry, on your contents, your personal belongings. That's why HO5 is the best because not only are we giving you all risk coverage on the structures, we're now giving you all risk coverage on your contents. All right, so good, better, best. The only difference between HO3 and HO5 is your perils that your personal property is covered with. Right, personal property under HO3 is broad form coverage. HO5 is all risk. That means an HO5 can cover a unique situation called mysterious disappearance. Right, because it's not excluded on an HO5, but it's not on an HO3 list as far as broad form perils. Mysterious disappearance isn't like alien abduction or anything. Let's say you have a stone fall out of your setting in your ring, or you just lost an earring. So it's not theft loss because theft, they'd have grabbed all your jewelry, right? You just lost one earring. Maybe it fell somewhere. You lost it someplace. An HO5, you can file a claim, and it can cover it. But always weigh out the cost of the deductible and increased rates for the next couple of years versus, paying the claim or replacing that earring out of your pocket. So again, always offer your clients options if something does come in like that. All right. So remember, HO2 is good, HO3 is better, HO5 is the best. So HO6, all right, well, it's for a condo. I forgot to put coverage D in here. I apologize. But again, for the coverage A, the dwelling, there is limited coverage for the dwelling because as a condo, you don't own the whole building. You're just covering your individual unit. The kitchen cabinets, the fixtures, including the bathtubs. You have some structures coverage versus renters. You don't have structures coverage. Okay. Whoa, this is acting up. For coverage B, it's optional. See, as a condo, you own that unit that you're living in, right? There really is no other structure. A lot of times the carport is covered by your homeowners association or condominium association dues. But if you are responsible for a separate garage or maybe a storage unit, we can add coverage B, all right, to cover that, but it's optional. It does cover your personal property, again, anywhere in the world on an actual cash value basis, brought from perils. Coverage D is included. I haven't listed here. I'll make that adjustment on my next recording. But yeah, loss of use is also included in the condo policy, HO6. And by the way, the test gets tricky. Someone owns a condo in a farmland community. Which of the following would be best for them? It's still a condo. It doesn't matter whether you own a condo in downtown or own a condo in farmland community. If you own a condo, it's an HO6. All right, just keep that in mind. Some people want to pick farm because, well, it's in farmland community. No, but it's still a condo. So be wary of things like that. Again, Section 2 is liability. It covers you and your family members anywhere in the world based on the limits you chose. All right. Then we have HO8. All right, it's for antique homes. And again, I got to add coverage D, loss of use. I apologize. We're going to cover everything on an actual cash value basis. So remember, HO8 is a modified HO1 for older homes, antique homes. So again, if an antique home burns down, we can rebuild it to look like it just like it did before the fire, but it's no longer an antique. And so we're going to cash you out. And that's what the actual cash value is all about. To give you a heads up also with theft, under an HO8, theft is limited to $1,000 per occurrence. All right. So yeah, that's all it's going to pay for any theft loss is $1,000 per occurrence. Just to give you a heads up. And again, Section 2 liability. Remember, loss of use is included. I haven't included in the slide, but Section 2 liability is also covered. All right. So some other items to be aware of: if you do own a a mobile home, you can get an HO2 or HO3, and then you can add the MH200, which is the mobile home endorsement. In order to get that mobile home endorsement, that mobile home must be at least 10 feet by 40 feet, and it also has to be valued at least at $4,000 to get the mobile home coverage. Right? You cannot get a mobile home coverage on an HO5. It's only on an HO2 or HO3, right, with a mobile home endorsement. Now, HO4 and or HO6 can actually be used if you own a condo. So it depends on the association policy that's enforced on the structure. The homeowners association or condo association coverage covers exteriors, which is a common ground. The hallways, the stairways, any common areas. That's the exteriors coverage. Some condominium association or homeowner association policies cover or include what's called unit owners coverage, and that would cover the interiors. So usually when they build a brand new condo, they're going to have exterior and interior coverage. Therefore, in buying a condo that was just recently built, you really only need an HO4, all right, because that unit owners covers the kitchen cabinets, the bathtub. All right, now eventually you want to cut your association dues, and so they're going to drop the unit owner's coverage, which means now you want to move over to the HO6 because you are now responsible for the kitchen cabinets and the bathtub and the fixtures. All right. So again, HO4 or HO6 may be used for someone who owns a condo. So beware of that. Some other things to consider: building ordinance. So let's say your house was built in the 70s and it did not have sprinklers, and you have a fire loss, and they, burned your house down. Now to rebuild it, got to put in sprinklers because the building ordinances or the building codes have changed in your area. The insurance company isn't going to cover that. That's excluded from coverage. Right? You didn't have sprinklers before the fire. Why are we covering the cost to give you sprinklers after the fire? That's a gain. And that contradicts the concept of insurance, which is restoring you what you had before the loss. And so you would actually have to pay to put, not above and beyond your deductible, you'd have to pay for the cost of putting sprinklers in. And so some companies offer you this building ordinance coverage, right? 10%, 25%, 50%. All right, so it depends on what they order. The older the home, the more the building codes have changed, and the more building code or building ordinance coverage you're going to want to get. I also have extended replacement cost coverage, and I have separate limits on that also. Now that's different. Extended replacement cost gives you an additional cushion to rebuild your property, not because of building codes, It's because cost of permits has gone up. Cost of lumber has gone up for whatever reason. Excuse me. And so we've had some fires in California recently. And so because of the fires, there's a huge demand for lumber. And so let's just say the cost of lumber is now going up. So if your house burns down now, even though we calculated to rebuild your house at 100% reconstruction cost in our proposal, because of this what's called demand surge, and there's a huge demand for lumber, which drives the price up, now it's going to cost a little bit more to rebuild your house than what we originally planned. And so this extended replacement cost coverage is like a cushion to cover those unforeseen additional costs because of things like that. Or maybe permits have gone up, like I said. Not because the building codes have changed, because the environment warrants you have to pay more. Okay. Always leave that as a cushion and at least get them some coverage. There's different limits each company's offer. Let's take a look at it. Loss assessment. If you're part of a homeowners association and condominium association, well, your policy includes $1,000 of loss assessment, which isn't a whole lot. So let's say we have a major windstorm that runs through your homeowners association and rips up your roof, causing some damage. Now, there's an association policy, but that association policy has a pretty high deductible. And who pays the deductible are the people that live there. And so basically, they do a loss assessment. They say everyone who lives in here that's part of our association, you all have to pitch in $3,000 to cover the deductible so that our association policy can re-roof, right, our roofs because of windstorm damage. Right. And so your policy normally comes with $1,000, which is common on the test if you get that question. In the real world, you can always buy more. Okay. So just to give you a heads up. Now, I said a windstorm rolled through and damaged your roofs where they need to be replaced. And then there's a loss assessment associated with that. That would actually be covered by your policy because your policy covers windstorm loss. However, if the roofs are just old and they need to re-roof the area because of wear and tear, since your policy does not cover wear and tear, if they did this loss assessment of, let's say, 3,000, right? Your loss assessment coverage won't apply because wear and tear is an exclusion on your policy. And so here and there you hear that phrase, coverage follows form. So loss assessment coverage will cover it if your policy covers it. But if your policy doesn't cover that peril and there's a loss assessment, that's where you're going to have to pay that out of pocket. So just to give you a heads up. Workers' compensation in California, that's where I'm from, it is a mandatory endorsement in our homeowners policies. Other states, it's optional. It may be included, it may be mandatory, it may be optional. Check with your state's guidelines to see what they do impose on your policies. Whether or not it's even included in the policy, it can be purchased, or like in California, it's mandatory as an endorsement. So even if you bought a renter's policy in California, it actually includes workers' compensation in that program. Because remember, renters and HO4 is a homeowner's policy. All right. A little bit more to know. If you own a home and you have another home that you basically are a landlord with, rather than getting a dwelling policy and adding a liability to that landlord, that dwelling policy, since you have liability on your home policy, why not extend liability to another location that you own, or even like vacant land, but not farmland? Okay. And so it's a little bit cheaper than buying the liability added to your dwelling policy. You're just extending liability from this home to another property that you own. Landlord's furnishings, right? So again, now maybe that other home that you have that you're renting out, you rent it out furnished, and so you can actually your homeowner's policy includes landlord's furnishings at another location, usually about $2,500, okay, to cover your another location that you own that you rent out furnished. All right, so there's some limitations on that. The next two, removal versus debris removal. You got to know the difference. Removal would be removing your property to protect it from damage because of a covered peril. So if your house is on fire, number one, get out with your family, right? Then call 911. Then or whatever the emergency number you have. Then run in, maybe move some of your property, remove it out of your house to your neighbor's driveway or garage or yard to protect it from further loss, of course, without endangering yourself. That's what we call removal. All right. And your homeowner's policy typically covers your property at another location for up to 30 days. All right. Now, debris removal would be cleanup after a loss. All right. Now, this one you need to watch because it's got to be due to a covered peril. So if a tree falls over, lands in your yard, but it doesn't hit your house, doesn't damage anything, well, your insurance isn't going to pay to remove that tree because you didn't suffer a loss. You just got a dead tree in your yard. But if that tree fell over and smashed into your house and did damage to your house, well, yeah, then we'll remove the tree because we need to remove it in order to build the house. So be wary of that. That's debris removal, cleanup after a loss. But it's only from a covered peril. All right. And again, some of your policies have limitations for lawn trees, plants, and shrubs, like maybe $500 a tree as a sublimit. So check with your policies, review that. Some of you may get some test questions on that. Usually there's a sublimit. It's 5% of coverage A, right, up to $500 per tree, shrub, or plant. Okay. Um, so be aware of that. But there's some additional items to know about the homeowner's policy. So keep in mind, homeowner self-contained package policy. I want to thank you for tuning in. Some additional webinars coming down the pipeline. I got dwelling, personal auto coverage, and I will get into other states with the no fault personal injury coverage, personal injury protection coverage, business owner and workers' compensation policy. Those are out. I actually have them on my website, so if you do register, you'll have access to those. If you do want to know more, like I said, consider registering. Go to lgdstudy.com. I have more sample test questions to help you see the material the way it's going to look on the test. As far as the degree of difficulty, the questions that I have are very similar to what you'll see on your test. Not exact. They change the questions all the time. But how you learn things and how people speak about coverages, very different from how they'll ask you a question. I mean, they'll ask you a question and they'll ask it using some language that it just doesn't even look familiar to you. So you want to dive in and do sample test questions of practice before taking your exam. There's an online playbook. Like I said, if you had a flashcard set, the online playbook would be your flashcard set. So when you see things like Paul versus Virginia, you need to know that it basically said insurance is regulated by the states. When you see the Southeastern Underwriters decision, you need to know that, well, the feds took over and regulated insurance. Okay, and so you have these associations, and that's what's in the playbook. Right? A lot more definitions and terms. I have charts like the differences between the homeowners policies, the dwelling policies, commercial policies. I keep adding more. There are more webinars that are recorded. You can go to my website, lgdconsulting.com, click on upcoming training. I keep adding some webinars. I'm trying to get more ahead of it, but I'm probably about 2 to 3 weeks in advance. I'm scheduling them. But if you have any requests, reach out. If you're here in the Northern California area, then maybe you can attend one of the classes. I do have them periodically, at least once or twice a month. And I am kind of moving up and down the coast. I've got, a couple coming up in Modesto and in San Diego. As you're studying, if you do have questions, you can email me. Let's see, let me go here. Go to info@lgdconsulting.com. So if you do have any questions, need more clarification, reach out. I'm here to help you pass this test. I want you to pass the test. I want you to have a good experience. It's a great industry to be in. And so the biggest hurdle is just getting through this exam. It's not an easy exam, but it is doable with the right tools. So good luck to all of you. Thank you very much for listening in.